You are not suffering from reality. You are suffering from the judgments you keep adding to it. Most of what weighs on you today has not even happened, yet your mind reacts as if it already owns the truth. You feel tension in the body, urgency in thought, and disturbance in decisions, not because life is attacking you, but because your reasoning is untrained in separating what is yours to control from what is not. This is where Stoic discipline begins, in the simple act of seeing clearly before reacting. If you are ready to stop living inside imagined pressure and start thinking with clarity and control, stay here and walk through this fully. Subscribe and remain part of this practice of inner discipline where thought is examined and the mind is governed with reason instead of fear. Number 1. The prison of imagined fear. Stop. Look at what you are doing to yourself. Most of your pain is not being handed to you by the world. You are making it, shaping it, extending it, feeding it with your own judgment. The event is often small. The wound becomes large because you keep returning to it in thought, dressing it in possibility, adding future losses, imagined humiliation, invented danger, and borrowed fear. You do not merely meet reality, you rehearse it, distort it, and then suffer as if the rehearsal were the thing itself. That is weakness of judgment, that is slavery of the mind, and if you are honest, you already know it. You wake up, and before the day has touched you, you have already touched yourself with dread. A message has not come, and you imagine rejection. A person has not spoken, and you imagine betrayal. A task has not failed, and you imagine disgrace. A discomfort has not arrived, and you imagine ruin. You live in a hall of mirrors built by your own attention. Then you call this anxiety, stress, pressure, or bad luck, as though naming the thing were the same as understanding it. It is not. Understanding begins when you admit that much of your suffering is self-made, and therefore within your power to reduce. What is in your control? Your judgment, your choice, your intention, your acceptance, your refusal to lie to yourself. What is not in your control? Other people's opinions, the weather of fortune, the body's vulnerability, the pace of events, the final outcome of most things you set in motion. You cannot command these, you can only govern your response to them. This is the dividing line every disciplined life must learn to see. The undisciplined mind ignores that line. It reaches beyond itself and then complains that the world does not obey. The Stoic mind stays where it belongs. It rules the ruler. It strengthens the part that can choose. You are not harmed first by events. You are harmed by the story you tell yourself about events. A delay becomes disrespect. A mistake becomes identity. A setback becomes destiny. A criticism becomes a verdict. A silence becomes abandonment. A loss becomes the end of your strength. This is how the mind inflates the present into catastrophe. It does not stay with what is before it. It runs ahead. It imagines the worst, then trembles as though imagination were proof. But imagination is not reality. It is only a faculty. It can help you prepare, or it can become the prison that keeps you from living with steadiness. So ask yourself with severity, what exactly has happened, and what have I added? Separate the bare fact from the decoration of fear. The fact may be simple. A bill arrived. A person was late. A task is difficult. The body aches. The future is uncertain. These are facts. Then comes the addition. This will destroy me. This means I am unloved. This proves I am weak. This cannot be endured. Everything is falling apart. That addition is where suffering multiplies. The fact may call for action. The addition calls for panic. A disciplined mind does not confuse the two. It strips the event down to its truth and acts from there. This is why you must train yourself every day to pause before reaction. The pause is small, but it is the boundary between slavery and freedom. When fear rises, do not trust the first voice. The first voice is often the oldest habit, not the wisest judgment. Stop. Breathe. Name the thing without decoration. Ask, is this within my power? If yes, then act with reason and courage. If no, then release the fantasy that resistance will change it. This is not passivity. This is order. It is the refusal to spend your strength on what your strength cannot alter. A person who cannot distinguish action from agitation will waste a life mistaking motion for virtue. You must also learn that the future is not a place where you live. It is an area of possibility. Possibility is not certainty. Most suffering begins when the mind treats possibility as if it were fate. You imagine sickness before it comes. You imagine poverty before it arrives. You imagine shame before anyone has spoken. You imagine failure so often that you begin to live as if failure had already won. But what has actually happened? Nothing yet. The mind has sent couriers into the dark and then bowed to their reports. Do not be fooled by your own projections. The future has no power over you until you surrender your judgment to it. There is a discipline here that must be practiced without mercy toward yourself. Each morning, before the noise of the day begins, remind yourself that you will meet difficult people, imperfect bodies, delays, misunderstandings, temptations, and moments that test your composure. Do not say this to invite fear. Say it to remove surprise. A prepared mind is harder to unseat. The shock of life is often worse than the event itself. When you expect humanity to be flawed, weather to be uncertain, and fortune to be unstable, you stop being offended by reality. You begin to work with it. You become harder to destabilize because you are no longer demanding that existence flatter you. Then, before you answer the first threat, ask what virtue requires. Not comfort, not approval, not escape. Virtue, wisdom, so you see clearly. Justice, so you do not harm. Courage, so you do not retreat from what must be faced. Self-control, so you do not become the servant of impulse. These are the only true goods. Everything else is secondary. Health is better than sickness, wealth better than poverty, reputation better than disgrace, but none of these make a person good. None of these save a corrupted character. If you sacrifice your judgment in order to avoid pain, you have already paid too much. If you preserve your character, you have not lost the battle, even if the world takes much from you. This is where many people deceive themselves. They think suffering means the presence of pain, but pain is not the deepest wound. The deepest wound is surrender to false judgment. A person can be in hardship and remain unbroken. Another can have ease and be inwardly miserable because he is ruled by fear of losing it. Who is more free? Not the one who has the softer life, but the one who does not tremble at every imagined blow. Learn from this. Freedom is not the absence of difficulty. Freedom is the refusal to let difficulty command your soul. You must inspect your fears one by one. Do not treat them as sacred just because they feel urgent. Fear of being judged, fear of being abandoned, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of sickness, fear of loss, fear of death, fear of being exposed, fear of being ordinary, fear of being forgotten. Ask each fear one question: what is the actual evil here? Often you will find the answer is not the event itself, but your opinion about it. Being judged is not a wound to the soul unless you surrender your worth to other people's unstable minds. Failure is not shame unless you make outcomes the measure of your character. Loss is not destruction unless you believe you are owned by what can be taken. See the lie and the fear begins to shrink. There is another practice you must adopt: voluntary discomfort. Not as punishment, but as training. Deny yourself ease from time to time so that ease does not own you. Walk without luxury, eat simply, sit without constant distraction. Endure cold, hunger, inconvenience, silence, and delay in measured amounts, not because suffering is good in itself, but because the soul becomes flabby when it is always spared. A person who never chooses hardship will be shattered by the first real hardship that chooses him. Train yourself before life does. Teach the body that it is not the master. Teach the mind that discomfort is not danger. Teach the will that it can remain upright when conditions are unfriendly. When fear speaks, answer with reason, not with slogans, not with empty positivity. Reason. Ask what is actually present. Ask what is merely imagined. Ask what action is possible. Ask whether your judgment is aligned with nature or corrupted by vanity. A man who fears public embarrassment may be suffering not from disgrace, but from attachment to appearance. A woman who fears rejection may be suffering not from loneliness, but from dependence on being desired. A worker who fears criticism may be suffering not from correction, but from pride. Strip the emotion to its root. Most fears are not about death or disaster. They are about the ego not getting what it wants. Recognize that, and you begin to loosen the chain. Do not confuse concern with torment. It is reasonable to prepare. It is foolish to suffer in advance. Prepare for the possibility of loss, but do not live as if loss has already happened. Prepare for illness, but do not become ill in imagination. Prepare for disappointment, but do not drink from it before it arrives. The mind is like a household steward. If you hand the keys to panic, it will ruin the house while trying to protect it. If you keep authority, the same house can endure more than you think. A steady mind is not one that never notices danger. It is one that notices without surrendering. Look at your daily habits. How much of your suffering comes from repeated mental rehearsal? You replay a conversation and find injury in every phrase. You imagine a future meeting and feel fear before anyone has entered the room. You anticipate failure and then grow exhausted from confronting a phantom. This is not wisdom. This is waste. The soul should not be dragged through 10 invented troubles before breakfast. When you catch the mind doing this, cut it off. Return to the present task. Return to what is before your eyes. Return to what can be done now. The present moment is where duty lives. Imagination is useful only when it serves duty, not when it replaces it with panic. You will have to become severe with your own thoughts, not harsh in the spirit of hatred, but firm in the spirit of guardianship. Not every thought deserves your loyalty. Some thoughts are merely noise. Some are temptations. Some are predictions made by a frightened animal within you. You are not obliged to obey the first internal voice that speaks. You are obliged to examine it. Is it true? Is it useful? Is it in keeping with virtue? If not, dismiss it. The mind is not a democracy where every impulse votes. It is a kingdom that must be ruled by reason. When life strikes, ask yourself whether the thing can be borne with dignity. Most things can. The body can bear fatigue. The mind can bear uncertainty. The soul can bear loss if it remains faithful to reason. What destroys people is not always the weight itself, but the belief that they are not meant to carry any weight at all. That belief is childish. A mature human being knows that hardship is part of the common condition. To be born is to enter a field where nothing external is guaranteed. You were never promised protection from all pain. You were given the capacity to meet pain nobly. That capacity is enough if you use it. There is no virtue in dramatizing yourself. Do not become the theater of your own suffering. Do not dress every inconvenience as tragedy. A minor insult is not the collapse of your dignity. A temporary loss is not the destruction of your life. A private embarrassment is not the ruin of your character. When you inflate what is small, you teach your mind to fear everything. Better to speak plainly. This is unpleasant. This is hard. This is not what I wanted, but it is not evil unless I make it so by surrendering my reason. That sentence alone can restore your stance. Truth calms the soul. Lies feed panic. Examine your attachments. Much of imaginary suffering comes from clinging. You cling to control, to praise, to certainty, to permanent comfort, to the idea that life should unfold according to your preference. But nature does not consult your preferences. The world moves according to its own order. People choose for their own reasons. Events unfold beyond your planning. To cling to what cannot be held is to volunteer for grief. Detach, not from your duties, but from your demand that the duties produce outcomes on your schedule. Do what is yours to do. Leave the rest to nature. This is not indifference, it is wisdom. When you wake in the morning, set your mind. Say to yourself, today I may encounter impatience, disrespect, confusion, delay, temptation, and perhaps pain. None of these things can corrupt me unless I let them corrupt my judgment. I will keep my attention on what is mine to govern. I will not waste my life defending an image. I will not beg reality to be easier than it is. I will meet it with clear eyes. This is how a strong life begins, not with fantasies of comfort, but with allegiance to truth. When fear arrives during the day, do not negotiate with it as though it were an enemy you can appease. Speak to it as a mistaken messenger. What are you reporting? Is the thing present or only possible? Is it within my control or not? What virtue is needed here? If the fear concerns something outside your control, return it to the world. If it concerns your own action, then act. Fear cannot survive long where duty is clear. Vagueness nourishes it. Clarity starves it. That is why the coward prefers confusion and the disciplined person seeks exactness. If your mind says, "What if I lose everything?" answer, "Then I will still have the power to choose rightly." If it says, "What if they reject me?" answer, "Then their judgment is theirs and my duty remains mine." If it says, "What if I fail?" answer, "Then I will have learned what is in my power and what is not, and I will continue to act with integrity." If it says, "What if I cannot endure this?" answer, "You are enduring it now in thought, and that suffering is already proof that the mind can bear more than it claims." You are stronger than your panic wants you to believe, not because you are invincible, but because reason can stand where fear collapses. Remember this, the soul is damaged not by events, but by surrender to false opinion. That is why two people can meet the same loss and live it differently. One man becomes bitter because he thinks the universe owes him ease. Another becomes steadier because he knows hardship is part of the world's fabric. One woman collapses under a harsh word because she has built her worth on praise. Another remains firm because her worth is anchored in conduct. The external event is the same. The judgment differs. Therefore, the suffering differs. Learn from this difference. You can train judgment. The evening examination is necessary if you are serious. Before sleep, review the day without self-deception. Where did you surrender to fear? Where did you imagine disaster? Where did you make a small thing large? Where did you act with courage? Where did you remain silent when reason called for speech? Where did you speak when silence would have been wiser? Judge yourself like a just teacher, not like a cruel enemy. The point is not shame. The point is correction. A life without review becomes a life ruled by habit. And habit left unchecked becomes character. Make your character deliberate. Refuse to drift into weakness and call it personality. You must also learn to tolerate not knowing. The mind often creates suffering because it cannot stand uncertainty. It wants guarantees before it acts, but life gives no such guarantees. So it invents worst-case stories to simulate certainty through fear. This is madness. Accept that much of life will remain unseen. Accept that you will not know how events unfold until they unfold. Accept that the proper response to uncertainty is not panic, but reasoned readiness. You do not need to know the entire road to take the next step. The duty before you is enough. Walk that step well. There is honor in enduring without complaint, not in pretending pain does not exist, but in refusing to make pain your identity. A disciplined person does not say, "Why is this happening to me?" as though he were exempt from the common condition. He says, "This is what has come. What is required of me now?" That question turns suffering into work. Work can be done. Self-pity cannot be finished because it feeds on itself. The moment you move from lament to duty, you recover your footing. Some of your fear is tied to death, though you may disguise it in many forms. You fear endings. You fear the body's decline. You fear the loss of what you love. Understand this: what is born must change. What is held must be released. Nothing external is yours forever. To cling to the temporary as though it were permanent is to live in denial of nature. Better to love what you have without claiming it. Better to use the day without worshipping it. Better to cherish people while remembering that they too are mortal and therefore more precious, not less. This knowledge does not make you cold. It makes you awake. You are not asked to eliminate all feeling. You are asked to discipline it. There is a difference. A life without feeling is lifeless. A life ruled by feeling is unstable. Reason does not crush emotion. It governs it. It tells emotion where to stand. It prevents fear from becoming a tyrant and desire from becoming a master. Do not seek to become numb. Seek to become just. Seek to become reliable to yourself. Seek to be the same person in comfort and in pressure, in praise and in criticism, in gain and in loss. That kind of steadiness is rare because it is earned. What should you do today, practically, when anxiety rises? First, halt the mental rush. Second, write down the exact fear in plain words. Third, divide it into what is within your power and what is not. Fourth, identify the virtue required. Fifth, take one concrete action, however small. Sixth, release the rest. This sequence is not a trick. It is discipline. Repetition will make it part of your nature. The goal is not to feel calm before acting. The goal is to act rightly and let calm follow from right action. You will fail at this sometimes. Do not use failure as an excuse to quit. You are training a mind that has spent years wandering. It will resist correction. It will beg for old comforts. It will dramatize setbacks. It will say, "This is just how I am." Reject that phrase. It is a confession of surrender. You are not fixed in weakness. You are being formed by what you repeatedly approve. Repeated approval of fear makes a fearful character. Repeated approval of reason makes a rational one. Choose what you approve. There will be moments when reality is indeed painful. A loss will hurt. A betrayal will wound. A body will fail. A relationship may end. A plan may collapse. Stoicism does not ask you to deny that pain. It asks you to refuse the second wound, the one you inflict by declaring the pain unbearable, unjust in the cosmic sense, or proof that life has betrayed you personally. Life owes you nothing except the opportunity to meet it with virtue. That opportunity remains, even in hardship. In fact, hardship is where virtue becomes visible. Without resistance, courage has no field. Without difficulty, patience has no work. Without loss, detachment has no meaning. So do not fear the testing. Fear the lazy life that never asks anything of you. Fear the softened soul that has never been trained. Fear the mind that lives only by comfort and calls that peace. Peace is not the absence of challenge. Peace is the agreement between your judgments and reality. When your judgments are true, reality stops being an enemy. It becomes the arena in which you practice strength. That is a very different life from the one ruled by imagination. In imagination, every shadow becomes threat. In reality, many threats vanish when seen clearly. Look how much energy you waste defending against events that may never happen. That energy could be used to build character, to fulfill duty, to care for others, to improve your craft, to govern your impulses. Instead, you lend it to phantoms. Why? Because fear feels active and action feels uncertain. But fear is only the appearance of action. It is work done in the dark without result. Real action is simpler and more demanding. Do the next right thing and let the rest unfold. This is how a person becomes useful to himself and to the world. Do not wait to become fearless before you begin. The brave person is not one who never feels fear. He is the one who does not permit fear to dictate conduct. That distinction matters. You may feel the body tighten. You may feel the mind race. You may feel the old urge to flee, hide, or appease. Fine, feel it, but do not obey it blindly. Hold your ground in the judgment that virtue is the only good, and that what is outside your control does not deserve your surrender. This is real strength. It is quiet, it is unshowy, it does not need applause. When you understand this deeply, you stop asking life to be kinder and start asking yourself to be better. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop building identity around comfort. You stop overreacting to every slight, every uncertainty, every delay. You become difficult to shake because your center is no longer rented from the world. It belongs to reason. And reason does not panic. Reason does not flatter. Reason does not invent suffering to justify weakness. Reason sees the fact, measures the response, and chooses the noble course. That is the work before you. Not endless analysis, not emotional indulgence, not the worship of fear as if it were wisdom. The work is to become sober in thought, exact in judgment, steady in action, and obedient to virtue. When you do this, the prison of imagination begins to lose its bars. You see that much of what terrified you was not life, but your pictures of life. You see that reality, though sometimes harsh, is often smaller than the mind's prophecy. You see that you have been spending yourself on shadows. So today, refuse the shadow. Refuse the extra suffering. Refuse the lie that you must feel certain to act well. Refuse the demand that the world owe you ease before you offer it discipline. Take the moment as it comes. Distinguish fact from fantasy. Choose what is yours to choose. Endure what must be endured. Act with justice. Guard your attention. Correct your judgment. Sleep with an honest mind. Wake tomorrow ready again. This is how a human being stops serving fear and begins serving reason. This is how suffering is reduced. This is how the soul becomes free, not by escaping reality, but by ceasing to add false misery to it. Not by waiting for a painless life, but by learning to live well within the one you have. There is no dignity in being ruled by imagined disaster. There is dignity in meeting the world as it is and remaining faithful to virtue. Choose that dignity now, not later. Now. Number 2. Reality hurts less than thoughts. Reality is often far smaller than the burden your mind places upon it. The event arrives, does what it does, and then passes according to its nature. Yet your thinking refuses to let it pass. It returns to the moment, examines it from every angle, invents hidden meanings, predicts darker outcomes, and transforms a passing difficulty into a permanent companion. This is why many people believe the world has become unbearable, when in truth they have made themselves servants of their own judgments. Before you accuse life of being cruel, ask yourself whether you have been treating your own thoughts as unquestionable truth. Look carefully at your last moment of anxiety. The body may have become tense, your breathing may have shortened, your attention narrowed until nothing existed except the object of your concern. Yet, if you were asked to describe exactly what had happened in that moment, you might discover that very little had actually occurred. Perhaps someone delayed answering your message, perhaps your employer requested a meeting, perhaps you made a mistake during an ordinary task. None of these things contains the suffering you experienced. The suffering came afterward, when the mind rushed ahead and announced conclusions that reality had never spoken. The disciplined life begins with a refusal to grant immediate authority to every impression that enters the mind. Your first reaction is not your final judgment unless you permit it to become one. This single realization separates the governed soul from the wandering one. The wandering soul obeys whatever appears most urgent. The governed soul pauses long enough to ask whether the impression deserves belief. Between the appearance of an event and your acceptance of its meaning lies the freedom that no circumstance can steal. You have likely spent years strengthening habits that now work against your peace. You assume that discomfort must signal disaster. You mistake uncertainty for danger. You interpret silence as rejection and delay as failure. These habits become so familiar that they begin to feel like reality itself. Yet familiarity does not make them true. A mistaken judgment repeated every day remains mistaken. Your task is not merely to think differently. Your task is to examine whether your thinking has been faithful to reason at all. Every complaint deserves investigation. When you say that life is unfair, what precisely are you demanding from life? Are you expecting every effort to succeed, every relationship to remain unchanged, every plan to unfold according to your wishes? If so, you are asking the world to abandon its own nature in order to satisfy yours. Such a demand cannot be fulfilled. The universe does not organize itself around personal preference. Peace begins when you cease demanding guarantees that no human being has ever possessed. The mind often creates chains from possibilities rather than realities. It imagines tomorrow's conversation before it happens. It suffers next month's loss before it exists. It rehearses humiliation that never arrives. By the time the actual moment appears, exhaustion has already settled into the spirit. You have fought battles that were never destined to occur. The disciplined person refuses this waste. Preparation belongs to reason. Endless rehearsal belongs to fear. Learn the difference, for they are not companions. Whenever an impression disturbs you, ask one simple question: what belongs to me in this situation? Your character belongs to you. Your honesty belongs to you. Your willingness to act with justice belongs to you. The outcome does not. Another person's opinion does not. Fortune does not. Once you separate these clearly, confusion begins to dissolve. The mind suffers greatly whenever it reaches beyond its rightful authority. It becomes calm whenever it returns to its own proper work. Many people spend their energy trying to manage the judgments of others while neglecting the judgment that truly governs their lives, their own. You cannot command another person's admiration. You cannot prevent misunderstanding. You cannot guarantee appreciation. Yet you can decide whether your conduct remains worthy regardless of the response you receive. A person who anchors self-respect in external approval has surrendered control before the day has even begun. Begin each morning by reminding yourself that your responsibility is not to control events, but to meet them well. Do not ask whether today will be pleasant. Ask whether today will find you prepared. Will you remain truthful when convenience invites deception? Will you remain patient when irritation seeks permission? Will you preserve self-command when emotion demands immediate expression? These are questions worthy of your attention because their answers depend entirely upon you. Carry this practice throughout the day. Whenever emotion rises sharply, refuse immediate obedience. Do not suppress it through force, nor indulge it through impulse. Instead, observe it as you would observe an unexpected visitor. Ask what judgment gave birth to it. Every powerful emotion rests upon some belief. Discover the belief before reacting. If the belief proves false, the emotion loses much of its command. If the belief proves reasonable, then act without excess, allowing virtue rather than agitation to determine your conduct. Notice how quickly the undisciplined mind enlarges ordinary events. A missed opportunity becomes permanent failure. One criticism becomes proof of worthlessness. One difficult season becomes evidence that life itself has turned against you. Such exaggeration is not honesty. It is surrender to distorted judgment. Reality deserves accurate measurement. Neither deny hardship nor enlarge it beyond its proper size. Precision is one of reason's greatest strengths. There is great freedom in describing events exactly as they are. Instead of saying, everything is falling apart, say, one plan did not succeed. Instead of saying, I cannot bear this, say, this is uncomfortable. Instead of saying, my future is ruined, say, the next step is uncertain. Each correction removes unnecessary suffering because it restores proportion. The disciplined mind does not dramatize. It observes, judges carefully, and responds according to truth rather than emotion. You must also examine the stories you tell yourself about your own identity. Many people secretly believe that one failure defines the whole person. They confuse performance with character. They believe that if they succeed, they possess worth, and if they fail, they lose it. This belief ensures permanent instability because outcomes never remain fixed. Character, however, is shaped by repeated choices toward wisdom, justice, courage, and self-restraint. These remain available whether fortune smiles or withdraws. Do not fear temporary discomfort. Fear becoming the kind of person who cannot endure it. Comfort is pleasant, but dependence upon comfort weakens judgment. Every inconvenience offers an opportunity to strengthen your capacity for steady conduct. When circumstances become less favorable, resist the urge to complain first. Instead, ask what quality of character this moment allows you to practice. Patience cannot exist without delay. Courage cannot exist without difficulty. Self-control cannot exist without temptation. Throughout the day, return your attention repeatedly to the present duty. The mind enjoys wandering into imagined futures because imagined futures demand no action. Present responsibility is less exciting but infinitely more valuable. There is always something worthy before you now. Complete today's work honestly. Speak truthfully in today's conversation. Correct today's mistake without resentment. Show fairness in today's decisions. Life becomes honorable through faithful attention to present obligations rather than endless speculation about distant possibilities. In the evening, do not seek distraction before examining yourself. Sit quietly for a few moments and review the day. Where did thought outrun reality? Where did unnecessary judgment create unnecessary suffering? Where did you remain faithful to reason despite emotional pressure? Where did impulse gain victory because vigilance was absent? Answer these questions without excuse. You are not conducting a trial but an education. Honest review allows tomorrow's conduct to improve because today's errors have been clearly seen rather than hidden. Never expect this discipline to become effortless overnight. Years of careless thinking cannot be undone by a single moment of understanding. Each day presents another opportunity to refine judgment. Some days you will succeed. Other days you will discover how quickly old habits return. Do not become discouraged by this. The purpose of practice is not immediate perfection, but steady progress toward greater self-government. Each correction strengthens the ruling part of your character. You will eventually notice a remarkable change. Situations that once disturbed you deeply begin losing their power. Not because life has become easier, but because your judgments have become wiser. External conditions may remain uncertain, yet inward steadiness increases. You discover that peace never depended upon controlling circumstances, it depended upon governing the faculty that interprets them. There will still be genuine hardship. Illness may come, loss may arrive without warning, relationships may end despite your best efforts. No philosophy worthy of respect denies these realities, yet even in these moments, thought can either deepen the wound or preserve dignity. You cannot always choose what happens, but you always retain the opportunity to meet reality with honesty rather than resistance, with courage rather than panic, and with disciplined judgment rather than despair. When you stop arguing with what has already occurred, your strength returns to the only place where it can accomplish anything useful. The past no longer demands endless revision. The future no longer demands endless prediction. Your attention settles upon the present exercise of virtue. Here you discover that reason is not cold or distant. It is the steady guide that prevents temporary emotion from becoming permanent misery. Do not measure the quality of your day by the comfort it contained. Measure it by the quality of your judgments. Did you refuse false appearances? Did you preserve fairness under pressure? Did you remain master of your own speech? Did you choose integrity when compromise appeared easier? These questions reveal genuine progress because they concern what truly belongs to you. Reality rarely possesses the cruelty that frightened imagination attributes to it. The event often arrives, demands your effort, and then passes. What lingers is usually the interpretation you continue feeding long after the moment has ended. Withdraw that nourishment. Refuse to decorate hardship with unnecessary conclusions. Meet each circumstance plainly, act according to reason, and leave what lies beyond your control, where it has always belonged. If you commit yourself to this discipline every morning, strengthen it throughout every challenge, and examine it honestly every evening, your life will gradually cease to be governed by restless thought. You will become difficult to disturb because your stability will no longer depend upon favorable conditions. It will rest upon something stronger, a mind trained to distinguish reality from imagination, duty from desire, and reason from impulse. That is the beginning of genuine freedom, and no external event possesses the authority to take it from you unless you surrender it yourself. Number 3. Stop feeding future misfortunes. You spend much of your life preparing yourself for sorrows that never arrive. Long before the day presents its true demands, your mind has already traveled into an imagined tomorrow and returned carrying burdens that reality never asked you to lift. You call this preparation because it feels responsible. Yet if you examine it honestly, you will discover that very little wisdom is taking place. You are not preparing your character, you are exhausting it. You are spending today's strength on tomorrow's shadows, and then wondering why you meet the present already weakened. The disciplined mind does not refuse to think about the future. It refuses to become its prisoner. There is a profound difference between thoughtful preparation and restless anticipation. Preparation asks, what action belongs to me today? Anticipation asks, what terrible thing might happen if fortune turns against me? One question produces useful effort, the other produces endless agitation. Learn to distinguish them because they lead to entirely different lives. Every anxious prediction begins with a hidden assumption. Somewhere beneath your worry lies the belief that if you can imagine enough possible misfortunes, you will somehow lessen their power. Yet experience quietly teaches the opposite. The more you rehearse disaster, the more familiar fear becomes. Eventually, your own imagination convinces you that uncertainty itself is evidence of danger. At that point, you are no longer responding to reality. You are responding to habits that you have patiently trained within yourself. Look closely at how this unfolds. A possibility appears before the mind. It has no certainty attached to it, only the faint outline of something that could happen. Instead of allowing it to remain a possibility, you begin supplying details. You assign motives to people who have not acted. You invent outcomes that have not unfolded. You calculate losses that have not been suffered. Then you experience the emotional weight of events that exist nowhere except inside your own judgment. You have become both the author and the victim of an unnecessary drama. Reason demands a different response. It asks you to examine whether the future deserves your attention at this moment. If there is a useful action available today, perform it completely. If there is no action available, then your continued worry accomplishes nothing except weakening your capacity to meet the present with clarity. The disciplined person never mistakes emotional activity for meaningful work. Restless thinking often feels productive because it occupies the mind. Yet occupation is not the same as progress. There is a subtle form of pride hidden inside many fears about the future. You believe that through sufficient mental effort you can gain control over what has not yet arrived. When this effort fails, you become frustrated, as though reality has ignored your wishes. But the future has never belonged to your command. It belongs only to the unfolding order of nature. Your authority begins and ends with your own conduct. Beyond that boundary lies a world that no amount of anxiety can govern. Train yourself each morning before the demands of the day begin. Sit quietly for a few moments and observe the direction your thoughts naturally wish to travel. They will almost certainly run ahead of you. They will present unfinished conversations, uncertain opportunities, possible disappointments, imagined failures, and countless situations that do not yet exist. Do not chase them. Let them pass before your attention without granting them immediate trust. Then deliberately return your mind to the only place where virtue can be practiced, the present moment. Ask yourself one question that deserves an honest answer. What duty stands before me now? Not tomorrow, not next month, not after every uncertainty has disappeared. Now, there is always an answer. Perhaps you must complete your work with greater care. Perhaps you owe someone fairness instead of irritation. Perhaps you need to correct your own speech, your own attitude, or your own neglect. These are matters within your governance. Every moment spent abandoning them in pursuit of imagined futures is a moment wasted. Notice how fear always promises protection, but rarely delivers it. It whispers that constant vigilance will prevent disappointment, yet disappointment still arrives whenever fortune chooses. The difference is that you have now suffered twice, first through imagination, then through reality. The disciplined person refuses to pay this unnecessary price. If hardship eventually comes, it will demand enough strength on its own. There is no wisdom in surrendering today's peace to tomorrow's uncertainty. Many people secretly believe that constant worry proves they care deeply. They confuse emotional disturbance with responsibility, but responsibility expresses itself through disciplined action rather than endless concern. A parent serves a family by acting wisely today, not by imagining every possible tragedy. A leader serves others through sound judgment, not through perpetual dread. A friend serves faithfully by being present, not by living inside endless speculation. Care without reason quickly becomes another form of attachment. Whenever your mind insists upon predicting future disasters, interrupt it with careful examination. Ask whether the prediction rests upon evidence or merely upon fear's desire for certainty. Most imagined catastrophes cannot answer this question honestly. They survive only because they are never challenged. Once reason begins asking precise questions, exaggerated fears begin losing their authority. Develop the discipline of limiting your attention to what the present hour truly requires. This does not shrink your world, it strengthens your ability to meet it. Great burdens become manageable when carried one rightful action at a time. The mind becomes overwhelmed only when it insists upon carrying an entire lifetime before breakfast. Nature never asks this of you. It offers one moment, then another. Your task is to respond well to each one as it arrives. Do not seek comfort in false certainty. Seek confidence in disciplined character. Circumstances will always remain uncertain. Wealth may disappear, health may change, relationships may transform, public opinion may shift without warning. If your peace depends upon these remaining fixed, your peace will always remain fragile. Build instead upon something that fortune cannot confiscate: honest judgment, measured speech, self-command, fairness toward others, and unwavering commitment to virtue. There is remarkable freedom in admitting that you do not know what tomorrow contains. Such honesty removes the impossible burden of pretending to control what no human being has ever controlled. Uncertainty ceases to be an enemy once you stop demanding that it become certainty. It becomes simply another condition in which wisdom must be practiced. Throughout the day, establish moments of deliberate return. Pause before beginning a new task. Pause before entering an important conversation. Pause before responding to unexpected news. During these brief moments, ask yourself whether your attention remains anchored in present responsibility or whether it has drifted into imagined futures. This repeated correction gradually reshapes the character. You become less reactive because you become more attentive. Do not permit your imagination to become the ruler of your conduct. Imagination is a useful servant when guided by reason, but it becomes a dangerous master when left without examination. It can invent enemies where none exist. It can transform ordinary uncertainty into unbearable tension. It can persuade you to abandon today's opportunities because of tomorrow's possibilities. Every time this happens, your own thinking has quietly stolen part of your life. At the close of each day, conduct an honest review. Ask yourself where future fears influenced today's decisions. Did they cause hesitation where courage was required? Did they encourage silence when truth should have been spoken? Did they distract you from present duties that deserved your full attention? Observe these moments without self-condemnation, yet without excuse. The purpose is correction. Every clear observation weakens an old habit. You will gradually discover that the future becomes less frightening as your character becomes more trustworthy. Confidence no longer depends upon predicting events correctly. It depends upon knowing that whatever arrives, you intend to meet it with wisdom rather than panic, justice rather than resentment, courage rather than avoidance, and self-restraint rather than impulse. This confidence cannot be granted by favorable circumstances because it is built through daily practice. Do not wait until life becomes certain before deciding to live well. Such a day has never existed and never will. Every generation has faced uncertainty. Every human life has unfolded beneath changing fortunes. Yet the opportunity to govern one's own judgments has always remained available. That opportunity exists for you at this very moment. Stop feeding future misfortunes with the energy that belongs to today's virtue. Withdraw your attention from imagined disasters and invest it where genuine strength is cultivated. Let tomorrow arrive in its proper time. When it comes, meet it with the character you have patiently formed today rather than with fears you rehearsed yesterday. In doing so, you reclaim the only possession that has ever truly belonged to you, the disciplined governance of your own mind. Number 4. Separate facts from mental stories. The greatest deception you will ever face does not come from another person. It comes from the voice inside your own mind that quietly adds meaning to every event before reason has had the opportunity to examine it. You believe you are reacting to reality, yet more often you are reacting to a story that has formed so quickly you mistake it for truth. This habit governs countless decisions, weakens your peace, damages relationships, and steals your attention from the only place where virtue can be practiced. If you wish to become master of yourself, you must first learn to separate what has actually happened from what your imagination has attached to it. This discipline requires uncommon honesty. Most people never question the first conclusion that appears in their minds. An unexpected look from another person becomes disrespect. A delayed response becomes rejection. A difficult conversation becomes evidence that everything is falling apart. None of these conclusions belongs to the event itself. They are additions supplied by judgment. The event is simple, the interpretation is optional, yet because the interpretation arrives so quickly, you embrace it without examination and then wonder why your peace disappears. A disciplined mind refuses to live this way. It understands that the first appearance of an event is only an invitation to think, not permission to believe. Before accepting any conclusion, it pauses long enough to ask a necessary question. What do I actually know? Not what I suspect. Not what I fear. Not what I prefer. Only what can honestly be observed. This single question removes countless unnecessary burdens because it separates certainty from assumption. Consider how often your suffering begins with words such as, "they must," "this means," or "it will probably." These phrases reveal that you have quietly abandoned facts and entered the territory of invention. You no longer observe reality. You begin constructing explanations without sufficient evidence. Once the story has been created, your emotions faithfully follow it. Fear, resentment, disappointment, and anger arise not because the event demanded them, but because your judgment declared them necessary. You possess the power to interrupt this process, but only if you are willing to become a careful guardian of your own thinking. Whenever something disturbs you, describe it in the plainest language possible. Remove every conclusion that cannot be directly observed. If someone failed to return your message, say only that the message has not yet received a reply. Do not immediately conclude neglect, disrespect, or rejection. Those belong to imagination until evidence proves otherwise. Precision protects the mind from unnecessary suffering. The soul becomes steady when it refuses to decorate reality with assumptions. Facts remain manageable because they are limited. Stories become endless because they constantly demand new details. One imagined conclusion requires another explanation, which requires another fear, until the mind becomes trapped inside a world it has built itself. The disciplined person refuses to expand what nature has presented. Reality is sufficient without unnecessary additions. This practice extends beyond relationships into every part of life. A mistake at work becomes a prediction of failure only because judgment insists upon extending one moment into an entire future. A physical discomfort becomes terror only because thought rushes ahead toward imagined outcomes. A financial setback becomes hopelessness only because the mind refuses to distinguish today's circumstance from tomorrow's possibilities. In each case, the facts remain smaller than the narrative constructed around them. Your character is revealed most clearly in these moments of interpretation. Anyone can remain calm while events unfold according to preference. The true test arrives when appearances invite emotional reaction before reason has completed its work. At that instant, your discipline either governs your judgment or your habits govern you. There is no neutral ground. Every impression asks for permission to become belief. You decide whether that permission is granted. Begin each morning by preparing your attention rather than your emotions. Do not hope that nothing difficult will happen. Instead, resolve that whatever appears before you will first be examined before it is believed. This simple commitment transforms the entire day. Instead of becoming the servant of appearances, you become the examiner of appearances. Your peace no longer depends upon favorable circumstances because it depends upon the quality of your judgment. Throughout the day, establish a habit of slowing your conclusions. When disappointment appears, resist the urge to explain it immediately. Let the event remain unfinished for a moment. Allow reason the time it deserves. Many conflicts disappear simply because the first interpretation proved false. Many unnecessary arguments never begin because careful observation replaced quick assumption. A disciplined pause often accomplishes more than an impulsive response. There is another story you must learn to question above all others. It is the story you tell about yourself. You may believe that one mistake defines your character, that one failure reveals your worth, or that one weakness determines your future. These conclusions possess no greater authority than any other unexamined judgment. Your character is not measured by isolated moments, but by the direction of your choices. Every day offers another opportunity to practice wisdom, justice, courage, and self-restraint. As long as these remain available, no single event possesses the authority to define your life. Be equally cautious when success arrives. The undisciplined mind invents flattering stories as quickly as fearful ones. Praise becomes proof of superiority. Achievement becomes permission for arrogance. Temporary fortune becomes confidence in permanent security. These judgments are no more reliable than despair. They simply wear more pleasant clothing. Reason remains balanced in both gain and loss, because it understands that virtue alone deserves complete confidence. Whenever strong emotion arises, look beneath it instead of obeying it. Emotion often announces that a story has already been accepted without careful examination. Rather than asking whether the feeling is pleasant or unpleasant, ask which belief produced it. If the belief cannot withstand honest investigation, release it willingly. There is no shame in abandoning false judgment. The greater shame lies in defending it after truth has become visible. Practice speaking to yourself with exact language. Replace exaggeration with observation. Instead of declaring that everything has gone wrong, identify the specific difficulty before you. Instead of claiming that no solution exists, admit only that you have not yet discovered one. Exact speech trains exact thought. Exact thought produces measured action. Measured action strengthens character. Character formed in this way becomes increasingly difficult for circumstance to disturb. The discipline of separating fact from story also transforms your relationships. Much conflict begins not because another person intended harm, but because intention was assumed rather than understood. Before assigning motives, ask whether you truly possess enough knowledge to do so. Another person's silence may arise from fatigue rather than contempt. Their disagreement may arise from sincere conviction rather than hostility. Justice requires that you refuse to accuse without evidence, even within your own private thoughts. This habit demands humility because it requires admitting how little you often know. The mind enjoys certainty, even when certainty rests upon fiction. Reason prefers honest uncertainty to comfortable illusion. There is strength in saying, "I do not yet know what this means." That sentence keeps the door open for wisdom. Premature conclusions close it before understanding has the opportunity to enter. During moments of pressure, return repeatedly to the distinction between what belongs to reality and what belongs to interpretation. The event belongs to reality. Your judgment belongs to you. Because your judgment belongs to you, it can be examined, corrected, and refined. This realization restores responsibility. You stop blaming circumstance for suffering that originated inside careless interpretation. You begin strengthening the one faculty that remains truly your own. At the end of each day, conduct a quiet review of your judgments. Recall situations that disturbed your peace. Separate them once again into two columns within your own mind. Place observable facts on one side. Place assumptions, predictions, exaggerations, and invented motives on the other. You may be surprised by how little actually belong to reality. This exercise gradually teaches the mind to recognize its own habits before they gain control. Do not expect immediate mastery. The habit of creating stories has likely accompanied you for many years. It will continue presenting conclusions with great confidence. Your task is not to eliminate impressions, but to refuse automatic agreement with them. Each careful examination weakens old habits and strengthens reason. Progress occurs through repetition rather than sudden transformation. Eventually, you will notice that situations once capable of overwhelming you now lose much of their force. This change does not happen because life has become easier. It happens because your judgments have become cleaner. You no longer burden yourself with meanings that reality never contained. You conserve your strength for genuine responsibilities instead of imaginary conflicts. Your attention remains available for virtuous action rather than wasted upon invented narratives. A disciplined life is built one examined judgment at a time. Every moment presents the same quiet choice. Will you accept the first story your mind offers, or will you patiently search for what is actually true? The first path leads toward confusion because it allows emotion to govern reason. The second leads toward freedom because it places reason above appearance. Walk that second path every day. Observe carefully before concluding. Judge carefully before reacting. Act carefully before speaking. In doing so, you gradually free yourself from the greatest source of unnecessary suffering, not reality itself, but the stories you once mistook for reality. Number 5. Master anxiety through rational judgment. Anxiety does not become your master in a single moment. It earns authority little by little each time you accept an untested judgment as though it were undeniable truth. A single uncertain thought enters your mind, and instead of examining it with reason, you surrender to it immediately. From that instant onward, your thinking no longer serves you, it serves fear. The event itself has not conquered you, your own judgment has handed over the command of your inner life. If you wish to become free, you must begin where all lasting freedom begins, with the disciplined governance of your own reasoning. Your mind was not given to you so that every passing impression could dictate your emotions. It was given so that you could distinguish appearance from reality, impulse from wisdom, and temporary feeling from enduring truth. Yet many people reverse this order. They allow emotion to declare what is true, then force reason to defend conclusions that were never carefully examined. This is why anxiety grows stronger. It is continually supplied with unquestioned agreement. Consider what happens when uncertainty enters your day. An unexpected challenge appears before you, and almost immediately your attention abandons the present moment. It races ahead, constructing possibilities that have not arrived and outcomes that have not been decided. Soon your body responds as though these imagined events have already become reality. Your breathing changes, your concentration weakens, and your judgment becomes clouded. None of this began with certainty. It began with permission. You permitted an impression to become a belief before asking whether it deserved your trust. Reason requires patience. It refuses to pronounce judgment before evidence has spoken. Anxiety cannot tolerate such patience because it feeds upon haste. It urges immediate conclusions, immediate predictions, immediate reactions. The disciplined person recognizes this urgency as a warning rather than a command. Whenever your thoughts begin demanding instant agreement, slow them down. Truth has no need to rush. Only confusion insists upon speed. There is a question that deserves your attention whenever anxiety begins to speak. Ask yourself, what exactly is reason asking me to do right now? You may discover that reason asks for something surprisingly simple. Complete the task before you. Speak honestly. Listen carefully. Prepare thoughtfully. Correct your mistake. Accept what cannot be altered. None of these actions requires panic. They require only steady judgment. Anxiety always attempts to convince you that emotional intensity equals necessary action. Reason quietly proves otherwise. Many people secretly believe that if they worry enough, they will somehow protect themselves from disappointment. This belief deserves careful examination because it hides beneath countless anxious habits. Has worry ever changed the nature of an event? Has fear ever persuaded fortune to obey your preferences? Has inner turmoil ever guaranteed a favorable outcome? The honest answer reveals the weakness of anxiety's promise. It offers control while delivering only exhaustion. You possess authority over one domain that no external circumstance can occupy unless invited. That domain is your faculty of judgment. Everything outside it remains uncertain by nature. The conduct of others, the movement of fortune, the condition of the body, and the unfolding of tomorrow exist beyond your command. Anxiety grows whenever you attempt to govern these things as though they belonged to you. Peace begins the moment you willingly return your attention to the territory that has always been yours. This requires a daily discipline of mental examination. Before accepting any troubling conclusion, pause and ask whether it concerns your own character or merely external conditions. If it concerns your character, then improvement is possible through action. If it concerns external conditions alone, then agitation contributes nothing useful. This distinction is not merely philosophical, it is practical guidance for every difficult moment you will ever encounter. The strongest defense against anxiety is not confidence that nothing difficult will occur. Such confidence rests upon illusion because hardship belongs to every human life. Genuine strength comes from trusting your ability to meet whatever arrives with disciplined judgment. You do not require certainty about events. You require reliability within yourself. Character built upon reason remains steady even while circumstances continue changing. Each morning, before your attention becomes scattered by demands and distractions, establish your governing principle for the day. Resolve that no impression will become belief without examination. Promise yourself that every judgment will first pass through reason before influencing your speech or conduct. This morning discipline gradually reshapes the mind because it places deliberate choice above automatic reaction. As the hours unfold, observe how frequently your thoughts attempt to outrun reality. They will predict conversations before they happen. They will anticipate criticism before it is spoken. They will imagine failure before effort has been completed. Meet each prediction with calm inquiry rather than immediate agreement. Ask whether evidence truly supports the conclusion. More often than not, you will discover that anxiety has presented possibility while disguising it as certainty. Do not become discouraged when anxious thoughts continue appearing. Their arrival does not signify failure. Habit naturally repeats itself until replaced through consistent discipline. Your responsibility is not to prevent every disturbing impression from entering your mind. Your responsibility is to decide whether it deserves residence there. An unwelcome visitor possesses little power unless invited to remain. Notice how anxiety frequently disguises attachment. Beneath many restless thoughts lies the demand that life unfold according to personal preference. You become distressed because success feels necessary rather than desirable. Approval becomes essential rather than pleasant. Comfort becomes expected rather than appreciated. These hidden attachments transform ordinary uncertainty into emotional turmoil. Reason loosens these chains by reminding you that virtue depends upon conduct, not circumstance. Whenever anxiety intensifies, return to careful observation of the present task. The mind cannot effectively govern both reality and endless speculation at the same time. Choose reality. If you are working, devote yourself completely to the work. If you are listening, listen fully. If you are speaking, speak with intention. Every wholehearted action strengthens attention. Every divided thought strengthens anxiety. Learn also to question the language you use within your own mind. Exaggerated language encourages exaggerated emotion. When you tell yourself that everything is ruined, your judgment begins searching for evidence to justify the claim. Replace broad declarations with careful descriptions. Speak inwardly with the precision of someone committed to truth rather than drama. Accurate language disciplines accurate thinking. Another practice deserves equal commitment. At least once each day, deliberately distinguish between what requires acceptance and what requires effort. Some situations ask you to act with courage. Others ask you to endure with patience. Wisdom consists partly in recognizing the difference. Anxiety confuses these responsibilities by urging action where acceptance is needed and resistance where action is impossible. Rational judgment restores proper order. Do not measure your progress by the complete disappearance of anxious feelings. Measure it by your growing refusal to obey them automatically. Freedom is revealed not when difficult thoughts vanish forever, but when they lose the authority to determine your conduct. The disciplined person may still experience uncertainty, yet remains capable of acting according to reason despite its presence. Your conversations with others provide constant opportunities to strengthen this discipline. Before responding to criticism, pause long enough to ask whether your reaction arises from wounded pride or honest evaluation. Before defending yourself, consider whether silence might preserve greater justice. Before assuming harmful intent, acknowledge how little of another person's inner life you truly know. Rational judgment protects relationships because it refuses to let impulse become speech. The evening offers another valuable opportunity for growth. Before sleep, examine the decisions your judgments produced throughout the day. Identify moments when reason governed your responses despite emotional pressure. Also identify occasions when anxiety quietly assumed control because examination was neglected. Neither celebrate nor condemn yourself excessively. Simply observe with complete honesty. Every accurate observation becomes instruction for tomorrow. Gradually you will notice a remarkable transformation. Circumstances that once seemed overwhelming begin appearing in their proper proportion. Not because the world has softened, but because your judgments have become less distorted. You no longer interpret every uncertainty as danger. You no longer treat every setback as permanent defeat. Your inner life becomes governed by deliberate understanding instead of immediate reaction. There is profound dignity in becoming a person whose peace cannot be purchased by favorable circumstances, nor stolen by uncertain ones. Such steadiness arises from countless ordinary moments in which reason quietly defeats impulse. No audience witnesses these victories. They occur within the private government of the soul, where character is slowly formed through repeated acts of self-command. Remember that anxiety always seeks to pull your attention toward outcomes that remain beyond your authority. Rational judgment continually returns your attention to the one place where meaningful work can be accomplished, your own choices. There you possess genuine influence. There your character is shaped. There virtue becomes visible through action rather than imagination. Continue this discipline without interruption. Let each morning begin with examined intention. Let every difficult impression encounter careful reasoning before acceptance. Let every evening conclude with honest review rather than comfortable excuse. Over time, your confidence will no longer depend upon the promise of easy days. It will rest upon something far stronger, the knowledge that whatever circumstances arise, you have trained yourself to answer them with wisdom instead of panic, with justice instead of resentment, with self-command instead of impulse, and with reason instead of fear. In that quiet mastery, anxiety gradually loses the throne you once allowed it to occupy, and your own governing mind finally assumes its rightful place. Number 6. Accept reality without emotional resistance. There is a quiet battle taking place within you every day, and most of the time it has nothing to do with the world outside. It begins the moment reality presents itself in a form you did not choose. Something changes without your permission. A plan fails despite your effort. Someone behaves contrary to your expectations. Your body grows tired. Time removes what you wish to keep. None of these events asks for your approval before arriving. Yet almost immediately another struggle begins. Instead of meeting reality as it is, your mind argues with its existence. You insist that things should have unfolded differently. You replay what cannot be changed. You resist what has already occurred. This second struggle becomes heavier than the event itself, because it is entirely sustained by your own refusal to accept what is already true. Acceptance is often misunderstood. Many believe it requires surrendering effort or abandoning responsibility. They imagine that to accept reality is to become passive before every hardship. Nothing could be further from disciplined living. Acceptance is not the abandonment of action. It is the refusal to waste strength denying facts that no longer belong to your control. The moment reality becomes fact, resistance cannot reverse it. It can only divide your attention between what is and what you wish had been. Wisdom chooses a different path. It begins from the world as it exists, not from the world it desires. Look carefully at how emotional resistance appears in ordinary moments. A delay becomes an insult because you expected immediate results. A disagreement becomes unbearable because you demanded complete agreement. A disappointment becomes bitterness because you believed your effort guaranteed success. In every case, suffering expands through attachment to an expectation rather than through the event itself. Reality simply unfolds according to its nature. The disturbance arises because judgment insists that reality should obey personal preference. The disciplined mind understands that every moment contains two distinct questions. The first asks, "What has happened?" The second asks, "How shall I respond?" The first question belongs to reality. The second belongs entirely to your character. Confusion begins when you attempt to answer the first with emotion instead of observation, or when you neglect the second because you remain occupied protesting the first. Your freedom does not exist in rewriting events, it exists in choosing the quality of your response. Notice how quickly resistance steals your attention from present duty. Instead of asking what can now be done, you become occupied by what should never have happened. Hours disappear revisiting conversations that cannot be repeated. Days are consumed imagining different outcomes for decisions already completed. This habit quietly robs you of the only opportunity that truly exists, the opportunity to act well now. Every moment spent resisting reality is a moment withdrawn from the practice of virtue. Train yourself to recognize the difference between pain and resistance. Pain belongs naturally to certain experiences. Loss hurts. Illness brings discomfort. Separation leaves sorrow. These responses are part of being human. Resistance adds another layer that need not exist. It says this pain is unacceptable. It declares that life has become unjust because events ignored your wishes. It demands certainty where uncertainty belongs by nature. In doing so, it transforms temporary hardship into prolonged suffering. Each morning, before the demands of the day begin, establish a simple commitment. Say to yourself that today will not unfold according to every preference you hold. Unexpected events will arrive. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will shift without warning. None of this prevents you from practicing wisdom, justice, courage, or self-restraint. This reflection does not make you pessimistic. It prepares your character to remain steady when ordinary difficulties appear. Throughout the day, whenever something opposes your expectations, pause before judging it. Do not ask whether you like what has happened. Ask whether it has already become reality. If the answer is yes, your first responsibility is acceptance. Only after acceptance can intelligent action begin. Until then, emotion continues arguing with facts that cannot be persuaded to change. Reality remains unmoved while your peace quietly disappears. Many people mistake emotional resistance for strength because it feels intense. They believe that refusing to accept disappointment proves determination. Yet true strength is measured by the ability to remain governed by reason while circumstances refuse cooperation. Anyone can maintain composure when life confirms personal desires. The disciplined person preserves composure even when life proceeds along an entirely different path. Such steadiness cannot be borrowed from favorable fortune. It must be cultivated through repeated acts of self-governance. Consider how often resentment grows from the belief that life owes you particular outcomes. You expect recognition for every effort. You expect fairness from every person. You expect certainty in situations that are uncertain by nature. These expectations quietly become demands. When reality refuses to satisfy them, resentment enters. The wiser path is to replace demands with responsibilities. You are responsible for acting honorably. You are not entitled to receive every result you desire. Acceptance also changes the way you meet mistakes. The undisciplined mind wastes energy denying its own failures or defending them through endless excuses. Such resistance prevents improvement because it refuses to admit what has become true. Honest acceptance says, the mistake exists. It belongs to my past. My responsibility now is correction. This attitude preserves dignity because it values truth above pride. Character grows wherever honesty replaces self-deception. Practice this discipline in your conversations. When someone criticizes you, resist the urge to defend yourself immediately. Listen carefully before deciding whether correction is needed. If the criticism proves accurate, accept it without resentment and improve. If it proves false, there is no need to become disturbed. Another person's mistaken opinion cannot diminish your character unless you abandon reason in response to it. Acceptance protects both humility and self-command. There will be moments when events exceed your ability to influence them completely. Illness may alter your plans. Economic changes may affect your livelihood. Relationships may end despite sincere effort. In such moments, your mind will naturally search for someone to blame or some impossible path back to the past. Resist this temptation. Blame rarely restores wisdom. The disciplined person asks instead, given that this is now true, what conduct best reflects virtue? This question immediately returns your attention to the one place where meaningful action remains possible. Develop the habit of speaking inwardly without complaint. Complaining often disguises itself as honest expression. Yet repeated complaint strengthens attachment to circumstances beyond your command. Instead of repeating how unfair a situation feels, describe it plainly. Then ask what honorable action remains available. This shift may seem small, yet it gradually transforms your relationship with adversity. Your attention moves from helpless resistance toward responsible conduct. There is deep freedom in recognizing that reality does not require your permission to exist. Seasons change without consultation. Time continues without negotiation. Other people exercise their own judgment, whether you approve or not. Fighting these truths only exhausts the spirit. Accepting them releases energy that can finally be invested where it belongs, the formation of your own character. Another valuable discipline is voluntary simplicity. Occasionally choose minor discomfort instead of avoiding it automatically. Walk when convenience invites idleness. Accept temporary inconvenience without complaint. Eat with moderation even when excess is available. These small practices remind the mind that peace does not depend upon constant comfort. By willingly accepting manageable difficulties, you strengthen your ability to receive unavoidable hardships without emotional rebellion. As evening approaches, review the day with complete honesty. Recall the moments when reality differed from your expectations. Observe whether you accepted events promptly or spent valuable energy resisting them. Do not accuse yourself harshly. Simply identify where attachment overpowered reason. Then imagine how the same situation could have been met with greater composure and clearer judgment. This daily examination gradually retrains the mind to cooperate with truth rather than argue against it. Over time, you will notice that acceptance does not make life smaller. It makes your strength greater. You stop scattering your energy across impossible battles against the past, against uncertainty, and against the independent choices of others. Your attention becomes concentrated upon your own thoughts, your own speech, your own actions, and your own responsibilities. There you possess genuine influence, and there genuine freedom is found. The world will continue presenting circumstances you never requested. Some will bring joy, others will demand endurance. None of them possesses the authority to determine the quality of your character. That authority remains with you alone. Every event simply offers another opportunity to practice wisdom instead of confusion, justice instead of resentment, courage instead of avoidance, and self-restraint instead of emotional excess. Do not wait for reality to become easier before deciding to live well. Reality has never promised convenience. It has only offered each human being the opportunity to govern their own mind within changing circumstances. Accept this truth without resistance. Let facts remain facts. Let the past remain finished. Let uncertainty remain part of life. Then direct your full strength toward the only work that has always belonged to you, shaping your judgments until they agree with reason, guiding your actions until they reflect virtue, and meeting every circumstance with the quiet steadiness of a mind that no longer wastes itself fighting what already is. Number 7. Train mind against false fears. False fear is not a wound that falls from the sky. It is a habit of the mind, repeated so often that it begins to feel like instinct. You are startled by a thought. You do not examine it, and before reason has taken its seat, you have already begun to obey it. That is how a human being becomes weak without noticing the loss. Not through one great collapse, but through countless small acts of surrender to impressions that were never tested. The mind sees a shadow and calls it a threat. It hears a possibility and calls it a certainty. It touches uncertainty and calls it danger. Then it trembles before its own inventions and blames life for the unrest that it has manufactured inside itself. You must begin by admitting something honest and severe. Much of what you fear has not happened, and some of it may never happen at all. Yet your soul has already paid for it in advance. You have lived through losses in imagination that reality never delivered. You have rehearsed humiliation, sickness, rejection, poverty and failure as though rehearsal were wisdom. It is not wisdom, it is the opposite of wisdom. Wisdom asks what is true. False fear asks only what is terrifying. Wisdom strengthens the ruling part of the self. False fear weakens it by teaching it to bow before every alarming picture that enters the mind. If you want to train the mind, then train it where fear first takes root. Fear enters as an impression. It is not yet truth. It is only a presentation to the soul, asking to be judged. The failure of most people is not that they experience disturbing impressions that cannot be avoided. The failure is that they accept them too quickly. They allow the first flash of alarm to become a verdict. They do not pause to ask whether the thing before them is within their power, whether it is actually present, whether it truly harms the character, or whether it is simply an imagined insult to pride. The disciplined soul learns to slow this process down. It does not let the mind run unattended into panic. Every morning you should prepare yourself for this work. Before the noise of the day begins, remind yourself that images will arise, and not all of them deserve your trust. The mind, left to itself, loves exaggeration. It inflates the uncertain. It dramatizes the ordinary. It converts inconvenience into catastrophe and risk into ruin. Therefore, you must stand watch over your own judgments from the first hour. Say to yourself plainly that today you may meet delay, misunderstanding, criticism, discomfort, and loss of control. None of these things is a moral injury. None of them can corrupt your virtue unless you allow fear to distort your judgment. This reminder does not make you gloomy, it makes you prepared. Preparation is not the same as dread. Preparation looks at the nature of things and acts according to reason. Dread looks at imagined outcomes and suffers without acting. One strengthens the soul, the other drains it. If you are going to think about what may happen, then think in a way that serves your character. Ask what you would do if the difficult thing appeared. Ask what quality would be required of you. Ask how you would preserve justice, composure, and self-control. Such thinking is not fear. It is discipline. It keeps the mind from becoming soft and easily shaken. A false fear often survives because it remains vague. It says only that something is wrong, that something awful may come, that disaster is near. It gives no clear shape to the threat because vagueness feeds anxiety better than clarity does. So your task is to force the fear into daylight. Name it. Define it. What exactly are you afraid of? A conversation? A loss of status? A financial strain? A diagnosis? An embarrassment? When you name the thing precisely, it often becomes smaller. Then ask a deeper question. What part of this lies within your command, and what part does not? This question is the first strong wall against needless suffering. If the matter lies outside your command, then stop begging reality to obey you. If it lies within your command, then meet it with action instead of trembling. Many fears are false, not because the objects feared can never occur, but because the mind has already assigned them power they do not possess. A difficult event may come, but difficulty is not the same as destruction. Pain may come, but pain is not the same as moral ruin. Discomfort may come, but discomfort is not the same as defeat. The body can be challenged. Circumstances can become harsh. People can disappoint you. None of this has the authority to make you unjust, cowardly, or self-indulgent unless you consent. That consent is the true danger. It is not the event but the collapse of judgment that turns hardship into slavery. You must practice separating appearance from essence. Something appears threatening. Ask whether it truly threatens what is highest in you. Something appears shameful. Ask whether shame belongs to the event or to your own failure of character. Something appears unbearable. Ask whether you are speaking truthfully or merely repeating the first cry of your frightened imagination. The mind that does not make these distinctions is easily ruled. The mind that does makes itself difficult to conquer. One of the most useful habits you can cultivate is the pause before conclusion. A thought arrives with force. Do not become its servant immediately. Let it stand before reason like a witness whose testimony has not yet been tested. Does this fear rest on evidence or on habit? Does it concern the present or a future that does not yet exist? Does it call for action or simply for acceptance? Does it protect virtue or merely protect comfort? These questions are not delays, they are weapons against falsehood. Every fear exposed to questioning loses some of its authority. There is also a second discipline you must not neglect: voluntary exposure to manageable discomfort. A mind sheltered from every inconvenience becomes fragile. A mind that occasionally chooses simplicity, restraint, and hardship learns that its suffering is not always tied to danger. Cold, hunger, fatigue, silence, delay, and inconvenience are not masters, they are teachers. They teach the soul that it can remain upright when conditions are unfriendly. They teach the body that it is not sovereign. They teach the mind that discomfort is often only discomfort, nothing more, nothing sacred, nothing deserving of panic. False fear thrives when comfort is worshipped. The person who believes every disturbance must be avoided becomes easily governed by anxiety. He begins to serve ease as though ease were virtue. But ease is not virtue. It is merely a condition. Virtue is what you do when ease is removed. Courage is tested when the road becomes rough. Self-restraint is tested when gratification is available. Patience is tested when the answer does not come quickly. Justice is tested when you are mistreated. If you have never practiced these things under pressure, do not pretend you know yourself. Training reveals what comfort conceals. The evening review is essential. Before sleep, look back over the day and identify the places where fear spoke too loudly. Where did you flinch without cause? Where did you imagine offense where none had been given? Where did you surrender concentration because a possibility frightened you? Where did you allow your attention to drift from duty into speculation? Record these moments inwardly. Do not excuse them and do not hate yourself for them. Observe them as evidence. Then determine what judgment should replace the one that failed you. This is how the mind becomes teachable. Without review, fear repeats itself in secret. With review, it is brought into the light and corrected. You will know your training is working when the familiar panic does not disappear entirely, but loses its command. The thought may still arrive, the body may still tighten, the immediate alarm may still flash across the mind, yet you will no longer rush to obey it. You will know how to stand still long enough to ask whether the impression deserves belief. In that pause, freedom lives. In that pause, the soul remembers that it is not the first movement of fear, but the choice that follows, which determines the quality of a life. Do not ask for a life without trials. Such a request is childish because it asks nature to cease being what it is. Ask instead for a mind trained to meet whatever comes without falsehood. Ask for judgments that do not collapse at the first sign of uncertainty. Ask for a character that remains steady when the imagination begins to invent enemies. Ask for the ability to see the difference between what can harm the body and what can harm the soul. Only one of those truly matters to the life of virtue. There is great dignity in refusing to magnify shadows. There is great strength in naming things accurately. There is great freedom in not treating every feeling as a command. The undisciplined mind makes itself a slave by obeying the loudest thought. The disciplined mind becomes free by testing every thought against reason. This is the work before you. Not endless reassurance, not sentimental comfort. Training, examination, correction, return. When false fear appears tomorrow, do not argue with it in confusion. Meet it with order. Ask what is happening now, what is imagined later, what belongs to you and what does not. Then choose the action that preserves virtue. If no action is needed, release the matter. If action is needed, take it without theatrical suffering. Let your mind become a place where impressions are examined rather than worshipped. Let your will become a place where fear is answered rather than obeyed. Let your day become a place where reason leads and the imagination follows in disciplined silence. This is how you train the mind against false fears, not by pretending that nothing difficult exists, but by refusing to grant imaginary danger the authority of reality, not by hardening yourself into numbness, but by strengthening yourself into clarity, not by controlling the world, but by governing your judgment. That is enough. It has always been enough, and once you live by it, fear begins to lose the power it gained only because you let it speak first. Number 8. Courage defeats imaginary suffering completely. Courage is not born in the absence of fear. It is born in the moment you refuse to let fear become your ruler. Every day your mind presents you with countless reasons to hesitate, retreat, postpone, and surrender. It whispers that the risk is too great, the uncertainty too dangerous, the future too unpredictable. It paints vivid pictures of failure before you have even taken the first step. It convinces you that suffering is waiting behind every decision. Yet, if you examine your life honestly, you will discover that many of these painful scenes have existed nowhere except within your own imagination. You have been fighting battles that reality never declared. You have been carrying burdens that existence never placed upon your shoulders. The tragedy is not that fear appeared. The tragedy is that you believed it without demanding proof. The disciplined soul understands that fear often arrives disguised as wisdom. It speaks with urgency and claims to protect you. It advises delay until every uncertainty disappears. It recommends silence instead of honest speech. It encourages comfort instead of growth. It persuades you to avoid difficult conversations, challenging responsibilities, and necessary decisions because they might produce discomfort. Yet every time you obey this voice without examination, your character becomes weaker. Not because the world defeated you, but because you surrendered your own judgment to an untested impression. You were not given reason so that it could justify fear. You were given reason so that it could govern it. The highest part of your nature does not exist to amplify every anxious thought. It exists to examine every appearance carefully and decide whether it deserves your agreement. This is the beginning of courage. Courage does not ask whether the path feels safe. It asks whether the path is right. If it is right, then hesitation has no authority over you. Think carefully about the moments you regret most. They are often not the moments when life challenged you. They are the moments when fear persuaded you to abandon what you already knew was honorable. You remained silent because rejection seemed unbearable. You delayed action because failure appeared frightening. You accepted a lesser life because uncertainty felt too uncomfortable. In each case, the deepest wound was not created by external events. It was created by turning away from your own better judgment. That quiet betrayal lingers far longer than temporary hardship ever could. Imaginary suffering thrives wherever courage is absent. It feeds upon possibilities instead of realities. It asks endless questions that can never be answered with certainty. What if everything goes wrong? What if they reject me? What if I fail? What if I lose what I value? The mind trapped in these questions never reaches action because it mistakes endless speculation for preparation. Courage interrupts this cycle by returning attention to the only meaningful question: what is the right thing to do now? Once this question becomes your guide, fear begins losing the influence it once possessed. You must train yourself to recognize that uncertainty is not your enemy. It is simply the natural condition in which every virtuous action must be performed. No one acts with complete knowledge of tomorrow. No one receives guarantees before making a difficult decision. If certainty were required before courage became possible, courage would never exist. It is precisely because the future remains unknown that courage possesses moral value. You choose what is honorable despite incomplete knowledge. That choice strengthens the ruling part of your soul. Each morning, before the demands of the day begin, prepare yourself with deliberate reflection. Do not promise yourself an easy day. Promise yourself a disciplined one. Remind yourself that opportunities for courage rarely announce themselves with comfort. They often appear disguised as inconvenience, criticism, uncertainty, or disappointment. Decide in advance that when these moments arrive, you will not immediately obey your first emotional reaction. You will first consult reason. This single commitment gradually transforms fear from a master into a messenger whose advice must always be examined. Throughout the day, practice moving toward what reason approves instead of away from what fear dislikes. If an honest conversation needs to happen, begin it calmly. If a difficult responsibility belongs to you, accept it willingly. If an uncomfortable truth requires acknowledgement, Do not postpone it, because delay only enlarges the shadow that already exists within your imagination. Every small act of courage weakens fear's habit of commanding your behavior. Character is strengthened through repeated obedience to reason rather than repeated obedience to comfort. Many people believe courage belongs only to extraordinary moments. They imagine great sacrifices, dramatic risks, or heroic deeds. Yet the most important acts of courage usually remain unseen. It takes courage to admit your own mistake without excuse. It takes courage to refuse resentment when treated unfairly. It takes courage to accept criticism without immediate defensiveness. It takes courage to remain patient while circumstances unfold beyond your control. These quiet victories shape the soul more deeply than public achievements because they are won where no applause exists. Do not underestimate how greatly your imagination exaggerates difficulty before action begins. A conversation feared for weeks often proves manageable once it starts. A challenge avoided for months often becomes understandable once faced directly. A responsibility imagined as unbearable frequently reveals itself to be no greater than the strength you already possess. Fear enlarges the unknown because it survives upon distance. Courage reduces the unknown by meeting it directly. Reality usually proves smaller than the image your anxious mind created. Another discipline deserves your attention. Learn to distinguish between protecting your character and protecting your comfort. These are rarely the same task. Comfort asks you to avoid inconvenience. Character asks you to remain faithful to virtue regardless of inconvenience. Comfort seeks immediate relief. Character seeks lasting integrity. Whenever these two voices disagree, examine which one reason supports. If you consistently choose comfort, fear quietly becomes stronger. If you consistently choose character, courage gradually becomes your natural disposition. Practice voluntary difficulty in small ways so that larger challenges do not overwhelm you. Accept inconvenience without complaint. Delay unnecessary pleasures. Complete responsibilities before seeking entertainment. Speak truth even when silence appears easier. These exercises train the mind to understand that temporary discomfort is not a genuine threat. Once the soul no longer worships ease, false fears lose much of their influence because they no longer possess the promise of comfort as a weapon. Be especially cautious of the fear of other people's opinions. Countless lives become smaller because they are governed by imagined judgments from strangers, acquaintances, or even friends. Ask yourself honestly how much authority another person's approval should possess over your character. Their opinions belong to them. Your conduct belongs to you. If your actions remain just, honest, disciplined, and guided by reason, then praise cannot improve your virtue and criticism cannot diminish it. Once this truth becomes firmly rooted within you, many imaginary fears disappear without resistance. When adversity eventually arrives in its real form, do not greet it with surprise. Hardship belongs to life just as seasons belong to nature. But remember this important distinction. Real hardship asks only for today's strength. Imaginary hardship demands strength for countless tomorrows that may never arrive. Courage refuses this impossible burden. It carries only what reality has actually placed before it. By doing so, it preserves energy for meaningful action instead of wasting it upon endless anticipation. At the close of every day, examine not whether fear appeared, but whether it governed your decisions. Recall the moments when hesitation tempted you. Did you act according to reason or according to avoidance? Did you preserve your integrity even while feeling uncertain? Did you remain faithful to your responsibilities despite discomfort? These questions reveal genuine progress. Courage is not measured by the absence of uneasy feelings. It is measured by the growing consistency with which reason remains your guide despite them. Gradually, you will notice a remarkable change within yourself. Situations that once produced overwhelming anxiety begin losing their power. This does not happen because the world has become less demanding. It happens because your inner government has become more orderly. Impressions still arrive. Difficulties still appear. Uncertainty remains part of life. Yet your first loyalty is no longer given to fear, it is given to reason. Once this order is established, imagination can no longer dominate your peace as it once did. There is profound freedom in realizing that courage is available in every moment, regardless of circumstance. It does not depend upon wealth, health, status, or favorable fortune. It depends only upon your willingness to align your actions with wisdom instead of impulse. Every difficult choice becomes another opportunity to strengthen this habit. Every challenge becomes another invitation to prove that your character belongs to you rather than to changing circumstances. Do not wait until fear disappears before deciding to live according to your highest principles. Fear may continue presenting its familiar arguments for many years. Let it speak if it must, but do not surrender your judgment to it. Listen instead to the quieter voice of reason, the voice that asks only one thing of you: act with justice, speak with honesty, endure with patience, and govern yourself with discipline. That voice will never promise an easy life, but it will always lead you toward a free one. When you consistently answer fear with courageous action guided by reason, something extraordinary happens. The imaginary suffering that once occupied your thoughts begins to dissolve. Not because every difficulty vanishes, but because you finally stop granting imagined disasters the authority to rule your inner life. You discover that the strongest fortress was never built around your circumstances, it was built within your own judgment. There, where reason governs and virtue leads, courage defeats imaginary suffering completely, and the mind becomes steady enough to meet whatever reality truly brings, not with panic, not with resistance, but with the quiet confidence of a soul that has learned to govern itself before attempting to govern anything else. Number 9. Find peace within present moment. Peace is not hidden somewhere in the future, waiting for the perfect set of circumstances before it agrees to appear. It has never lived there, yet you continue searching for it in tomorrow's success, tomorrow's certainty, tomorrow's approval, or tomorrow's comfort. Every day the mind quietly tells you that if only one more problem disappeared, then you could finally rest. But another problem always follows. Another uncertainty arrives. Another desire takes the place of the one you satisfied. The search continues because you have been looking for peace where it has never existed. A mind that depends upon changing circumstances can never become steady because circumstances themselves refuse to remain still. Look honestly at your own thinking. How often are you physically present in one place while your attention has already abandoned it? Your body sits at the table, yet your thoughts wander toward tomorrow's obligations. You speak with another person while secretly replaying yesterday's disappointment. You begin one task while already fearing the next. The present moment receives only fragments of your attention because your imagination has scattered the rest across events that either no longer exist or have not yet arrived. You wonder why peace feels distant, yet you have trained your own mind to live everywhere except where your life is actually unfolding. The disciplined soul refuses this habit. It understands that the only place where judgment can be corrected, virtue can be practiced, and character can be strengthened is the moment directly before it. Yesterday cannot receive a wiser action because it has already completed its course. Tomorrow cannot receive your discipline because it has not yet entered existence. Only this present moment allows you to think clearly, speak honestly, choose justly, and govern yourself with reason. Every attempt to escape this truth weakens your inner life because it exchanges reality for imagination. Many people believe they are troubled by the weight of life itself. More often they are burdened by carrying many moments at once. They collect yesterday's mistakes, today's responsibilities, and tomorrow's possibilities into a single load, then wonder why it feels impossible to carry. Nature has never asked you to bear such a burden. It presents only one moment at a time. The mind creates the excess by refusing to remain where life actually exists. Ask yourself a simple question whenever unrest begins to grow. What is required of me at this exact moment? Not next week, not after every uncertainty has disappeared, not after everyone finally understands you. What is required now? You may discover that the answer is surprisingly modest. Complete one task carefully, speak one truthful sentence, listen without interruption, correct one mistake, endure one discomfort without complaint. These actions appear ordinary, yet they build extraordinary strength because they anchor the mind in reality rather than speculation. Your imagination constantly attempts to persuade you that peace depends upon solving every future difficulty before it arrives. This is impossible. Tomorrow will always contain unknown conditions. If your peace requires certainty about them, then peace will remain forever beyond your reach. Reason teaches a different lesson. It reminds you that your responsibility has always been limited. You are not responsible for mastering every future event today. You are responsible only for governing your present judgment with wisdom. Notice how easily the mind leaves the present through comparison. It compares today's progress with another person's success. It compares the current stage of life with an imagined ideal. It compares present circumstances with memories that have become polished through time. Comparison rarely strengthens gratitude because it directs attention away from what is available toward what is absent. A disciplined person compares today's conduct only with yesterday's character. The question is never whether life matches another person's experience. The question is whether your own judgments have become more reasonable, your actions more just, your desires more moderate, and your responses more disciplined. Peace also disappears whenever you attempt to control what belongs to another person's will. You replay conversations, trying to reshape words already spoken. You anticipate reactions that belong entirely to someone else. You become restless because another person's approval has quietly become more valuable than your own integrity. This habit chains your peace to circumstances that have never belonged to you. The moment you remember that another person's choices remain outside your authority, your attention returns to the one place where freedom can still be found, your own character. There is another obstacle that steals the present moment without announcing itself. It is the habit of postponing life until conditions improve. You tell yourself that genuine contentment will begin after one more achievement, one more purchase, one more promotion, one more victory, one more resolution of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the only day actually placed into your care passes unnoticed. This habit does not prepare you for the future. It teaches you to overlook the only time in which virtue can ever be practiced. The disciplined mind treats each ordinary moment as sufficient for the work of self-governance. Washing a dish becomes an opportunity for attention. A difficult conversation becomes an opportunity for justice. Waiting patiently becomes an opportunity for self-restraint. Physical discomfort becomes an opportunity for endurance. Every circumstance contains material for virtue if you stop demanding that life first become more convenient. Morning provides the first opportunity to establish this discipline. Before your attention becomes divided by plans and obligations, remind yourself that the day ahead belongs to nature, not to your preferences. Events will unfold according to countless causes beyond your command. Your task is not to command those events. Your task is to meet each one with clear judgment. Carry this intention into the day, and the present moment becomes your workshop rather than your battlefield. Whenever your thoughts begin racing ahead, gently return them to what is directly before you. Ask whether the thing disturbing you exists now or only in imagination. If it exists only in imagination, Refuse to surrender today's peace to tomorrow's uncertainty. If it exists now, meet it with reason instead of resistance. Either way, the present moment regains its rightful place as the center of your attention. The more faithfully you practice this discipline, the more you discover that peace was never something to be discovered in distant circumstances. It was something to be cultivated through disciplined judgment. It grows each time you refuse to carry unnecessary burdens, each time you release attachment to outcomes beyond your control, and each time you give your complete attention to the duty immediately before you. The present moment is small enough for reason to govern, honest enough for virtue to appear, and sufficient enough for a well-ordered soul to flourish. Live there consistently, and you will find that the restless search for peace quietly comes to an end, not because life has become easier, but because your own mind has finally learned to remain where life truly is. Peace does not arrive when life finally becomes quiet. It arrives when the mind stops demanding that life should be different from what it is. You have been trained, without noticing it, to postpone your peace into conditions that never stabilize. You tell yourself that once uncertainty disappears, once people behave correctly, once outcomes align with your expectations, then you will finally be at rest. But this promise has never been fulfilled because it rests on something outside your control. The mind that anchors peace in external events is always waiting, and waiting is the opposite of living. Look carefully at how your attention behaves throughout a single day. You sit in one place, but your mind is scattered across many times. It revisits what has already ended as though it can still be changed. It runs forward into what has not yet arrived as though it can be controlled. In doing so, it abandons the only place where clarity is possible. The present moment is not a narrow fragment of time. It is the only domain where judgment can be corrected, where choice can be exercised, and where character can be expressed. Everything else is either memory or imagination, neither of which requires your emotional surrender. You do not suffer because the present moment is unbearable. You suffer because you refuse to remain within it. The mind adds weight to life by carrying multiple realities at once. It carries yesterday's regret, today's responsibility, and tomorrow's fear in a single burden. Nature never assigned you such a load. It only ever presents one moment at a time. The excess exists only in thought, and what is created in thought can also be dissolved in thought through disciplined attention. To find peace within the present moment, you must first stop arguing with what is already true. Reality does not ask for your approval before unfolding. It simply appears, and then your judgment decides whether to meet it with clarity or resistance. When you resist what is present, you divide your mind. One part observes reality while another part insists reality should be different. That division is where unrest begins. Peace is not the absence of events. It is the absence of inner contradiction toward events. Train yourself to notice when the mind leaves the present. It often does so quietly, disguised as planning, worrying, or replaying. Each time you catch it, do not punish yourself and do not indulge it. Simply return. Return to the task in front of you. Return to the words being spoken. Return to the action required now. This act of return, repeated without drama, becomes the foundation of inner stability. The mind learns that it does not need to wander to survive. Much of your dissatisfaction comes from evaluating life while ignoring where life actually takes place. You judge the whole day while experiencing only a moment of it. You declare conclusions about your entire path while standing in a single step. This is not judgment guided by reason. It is judgment distorted by impatience. A disciplined mind evaluates only what is directly before it. It asks whether this moment is being met with wisdom, not whether the entire future has already been secured. When you remain fully in the present, something subtle begins to change. The emotional weight of imagined outcomes begins to weaken. Fear loses its grip because fear depends on distance. It requires you to be mentally far from what is real. In the present, there is only what is happening, not what might happen. There is only what can be done now, not what could have been done. In this clarity, unnecessary suffering begins to dissolve. Now consider the illusion of fear more directly. Fear rarely speaks in terms of what is. It speaks in terms of what might be taken from you, what might fail, what might be lost, what might go wrong beyond your control. It builds entire scenarios without evidence and demands emotional obedience as though prediction were reality. You have given too much authority to this voice simply because it speaks loudly and quickly. Yet speed is not truth. Volume is not wisdom. To live freely beyond fear's illusion, you must first recognize that fear is not a prophecy. It is a judgment, and every judgment is subject to examination. When fear appears, do not ask whether it feels convincing. Ask whether it is dealing with what is within your control or what lies beyond it. If it lies beyond it, then fear is misdirected. If it lies within it, then it requires action, not panic. In both cases, fear loses its authority once it is properly examined. Freedom is not the absence of threatening possibilities. Freedom is the recognition that threatening possibilities do not govern your moral life. What governs your moral life is your capacity to choose wisely in whatever circumstance arises. No external event can take that capacity unless you surrender it through unexamined reaction. The moment you stop granting fear automatic authority over your judgment, you begin to experience a different kind of life. Not a life without difficulty, but a life without internal slavery to imagined outcomes. Many people believe fear protects them, but they confuse protection with avoidance. Avoidance delays discomfort, but strengthens dependence on it. Every time you avoid acting because of fear, you teach the mind that fear is a reliable guide. Over time, fear becomes louder, not because reality has become more dangerous, but because your judgment has become more obedient to imagination than to reason. The cure is not to eliminate fear, but to stop obeying it without examination. Begin each morning by recognizing that you will encounter impressions that feel urgent but are not necessarily true. You will feel the pull of anticipation, the pressure of expectation, and the tension of uncertainty. None of these requires immediate agreement. Promise yourself that no impression will become action without passing through reason. This is how fear is contained, not by force, but by governance. As the day unfolds, keep returning to this distinction: what is present and what is imagined. The present requires attention, the imagined requires detachment. When you confuse the two, you suffer unnecessarily. When you separate them clearly, your energy becomes available again for meaningful conduct. You stop reacting to shadows and start responding to reality. There is also a quieter discipline required. You must stop treating comfort as the measure of truth. Fear often disguises itself as concern for well-being. It tells you that discomfort is always a sign of danger. Yet many forms of discomfort are simply the cost of growth, responsibility, or honesty. If you treat every discomfort as something to escape, you will never develop strength. A life governed by comfort becomes fragile, and fragility produces more fear, not less. True freedom is found when your actions are no longer dictated by the promise of comfort or the threat of discomfort. Instead, they are guided by reasoned judgment about what is appropriate in the present moment. This shift is subtle but decisive. You stop asking what feels safest and begin asking what is right. You stop asking what avoids fear and begin asking what maintains integrity. When fear loses its authority, the present moment becomes clearer. You no longer rush through it toward imagined futures. You no longer drag it down with memories that cannot be changed. You meet it directly. You see what is required. You act without unnecessary emotional distortion. In this state, life does not become easier in appearance, but it becomes simpler in structure, and simplicity is the foundation of peace. At the end of each day, review not the events themselves, but your relationship to them. Where did your mind remain present, and where did it escape? Where did fear speak without being questioned? Where did imagination replace observation? Do not judge yourself harshly. Observe honestly. Correction requires clarity, not punishment. Each accurate observation becomes a step towards steadier judgment tomorrow. If you continue this discipline, something gradual but profound occurs. The present moment becomes less of a place you visit and more of a place you inhabit. Fear becomes less of a ruler and more of a passing impression. Life becomes less of a sequence of imagined threats and more of a sequence of real actions governed by reason. In that transformation, peace is no longer something pursued. It becomes the natural state of a mind that has stopped resisting what is and stopped obeying what is not.